Hey there, it's Steve from Serious Keto, and this is the Not So Serious Keto video podcast. In fact, it is the very first Not So Serious video podcast of 2021. So, welcome everybody to a brand new year. And because it's a new year, I suspect we're going to start getting an influx of new viewers. This happened last year as well. You know how it goes. People are excited about the new year. They start looking into diets. They start looking into keto, and they find this channel. So if you are a new viewer, welcome to the channel. I think you're going to find we're a pretty friendly group here. I also expect that because we're going to get this influx of new viewers, there's a couple things we'll probably wind up seeing. First, I'm going to start getting a lot of repeat comments and questions. I'm already seeing them just a few days in. Things like, man, you take really big bites. Or, I can't believe you're using vegetable oil. I thought you were keto. So, be aware, if you are new and you're looking at some older videos, things have changed. So I've gotten a little bit cleaner in terms of keto. I've learned a little bit more. I think my video editing perhaps has gotten a little bit tighter. Still take the big bites though. And you can't take the good without the bad. So I'm sure as we get some new viewers, I would expect to see a little bit of a patch here in January where there's some nasty comments either about keto or about this channel, or maybe even new people saying stuff to people that have been here for a while. But I monitor the comments pretty well, and I will stomp down on that pretty hard and pretty quick. So for those of you who are new to Serious Keto and are wondering, what is this Not So Serious Keto podcast thing all about? Well, basically it's a once a week thing. I generally do these on Mondays. They're about 15 to 22 minutes long, and it's just me talking. So if you don't enjoy me talking, probably not the best thing to watch or listen to. But if you do enjoy me talking, I'll talk about keto, I'll talk about just life, sometimes pop culture, various observations. Sometimes there's a thread to it all, sometimes not so much. Sometimes I throw in little Easter eggs, things I want to see if people can catch. That's about it. And I think you'll get a pretty good flavor for that today because I suspect I'm going to be kind of all over the place. As we get into the new year, and I think we have some people that'll show up and probably have some questions about keto and what's it all about, I hope that as you watch the videos, you'll start to get my philosophy for keto, which is what I call sensible keto. It's not really militant, it's not dogmatic, it's not a religion. I believe that keto is a lifestyle, and you adhere to that lifestyle to the best of your ability. There are some clean keto folks out there that have a very strict interpretation of what keto should be, and if that works for them, great. But as for me, I like having a little bit more latitude with my keto. I believe that sometimes it's more low carb than it is, strictly speaking, keto. And by being in that mindset, I find that I personally am able to stay in ketosis and able to continue to adhere to this lifestyle. One of the complaints you often hear people state about keto, and I don't think it's so much from keto people as the people that are anti-keto, is that keto isn't sustainable. And I disagree. I'm approaching 2 years on keto and feel not the least bit bored or tired of it. And I think part of the reason for that is my willing to be a little bit flexible with keto. But if you're new to it all and sort of keto curious, which is where I was at about 2 years ago, I was trying to figure out, what should I do? What should I do to straighten out my health, straighten out my weight, straighten out my life? I had started the method that Penn Jillette used in his book Presto. So what Penn Jillette did is he started off for 2 weeks eating nothing but potatoes. And I described this whole process in my transformation series, which I'll link to up here, so I won't regurgitate all of that. But eventually he segued into what was sort of a vegan keto thing. I don't think he realized that it was vegan keto, he just thought it was vegan until he found himself going into ketosis. But as I was emulating his approach, I realized this was not going to be sustainable for me. And I wanted to figure out what would be the best sustainable dietary lifestyle. And I started looking at things like the Mediterranean diet and Whole30 and paleo and keto and Atkins. And really what drove me to keto is I think that I'm a Wisconsinite and I just love dairy. And keto was the thing that was going to allow me to continue to scratch my dairy itch. I don't know if that came out exactly the way I wanted it to. Dairy itch. As I was thinking this weekend about if someone came to me and said, I'm looking to adopt a new dietary lifestyle, what would you recommend? And my first thought is it's pretty easy for me to recommend keto because I do keto and I feel I'm a pretty good success story with it. But I started thinking, are there tests or questions that a person could ask themselves to determine, is keto the right thing? Is paleo the right thing? I think a lot of it comes down to what you really like to eat and what might be sustainable for you. And as I said, for me, something without dairy just would make me unhappy. And I started to think about the comedian Jeff Foxworthy, who has this routine on "You May Be a Redneck." So I don't know that I could even think of any of them, but I'm sure it's like, if you've got a gun rack on your Volkswagen Beetle, you might be a redneck. I don't know if that's one of them. But I started thinking, what are some things that might determine, are you an ideal candidate for keto? And I thought, if you could sit down and eat an entire tub of sour cream, you might be keto. If you think hollandaise sauce and soup are synonyms, you might be keto. If you see nothing wrong with putting a couple tablespoons of butter into your coffee, you might be keto. So now, let me ask those of you out there who've been keto for any length of time, if you've got any of those sort of questions, ideally if they're a little bit humorous, that would be fantastic. And if you do, put them down in the comments below. I think they might be good for a chuckle. So for those of you who are regular viewers, you know that the content has been pretty light the last couple of weeks because my son Connor was home from the Army, sort of in between basic training and advanced individual training. He was home for 2 weeks, and a couple of observations on that. First off, this kid eats like a hobbit. I didn't know that there could be 7 meals in the course of a day, but man, does he eat a lot. Like, our food budget tripled for 2 weeks while he was at home. The other thing I noticed, the very first day, well, it was the second day he was home, but after he had taken his first shower, how well he hung up his towel. Back pre-Army, he just sort of like barfed his towel towards the rack, and it looked lazy and sloppy and what you would expect from a college-aged male. But after his first shower at home, the towel was hung up over the rack in like this tri-fold thing that was just perfect. It was absolutely perfect. And the front and the back ends hung down perfectly even. It was totally level and square. And I don't think I could have done that with a protractor and a level, but that's what it was. I thought, wow, this is cool. The boy is taking some pride. By this morning, when I took him back to the airport, the towel was just like right over the rack, like he didn't care. So maybe this next 9 weeks back at the Army will get him back into proper towel hanging mode. But it was a lot of fun having him at home. I had to really kind of share him with everybody else. Everybody wanted his time. So I didn't get as much of his time as I wanted, but that's cool. I would rather see him hanging out with his son, which he did pretty much nonstop. We did a ton of cooking, a lot of different recipes. Every one of these recipes were an awful lot of work. Connor got home and he went straight for all the high-end cookbooks. So there was some work involved. I do have a couple of ideas that came from it, though. A couple of sort of clever things that just I tried, and purely by happenstance, they worked out really well, and I think could make some decent future videos. So during this 2-week period, I had wondered at the outset if it was going to be rejuvenating for me, not pumping out 3 videos a week and not being in the comment section constantly. And it actually wasn't. I think I get more energized when I am making videos and when I'm engaged with the community. Plus, there's sort of the anxiety of watching the channel contract. Views, time watched, pretty much every stat related to the channel has declined by about 20% over the last 2 weeks. And part of that may be the holidays. It could be that just everybody is not watching things, and maybe that comes back in January. I hope so. But like I said, that was a little bit anxiety inducing. It was offset, however, by hitting 100,000 subscribers. And as much as I'd like to say that I had a big celebration when I hit 100,000, I didn't. It didn't really feel like anything, to me. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I think it just hasn't fully sunk in. So I'll probably wait to celebrate until I get my 100K subscriber plaque from YouTube. And when I do, I'll make a little video of that and give you all, a shout out. As we look forward to 2021, I'm pretty excited about Serious Keto and the content that we've got coming up. We still have Courtney for another 5 weeks before she heads off to basic training. So we'll probably have her in some more review videos and maybe some taste testings. We'll try and get her in at least one video a week for the next 5 weeks before she heads out. And we do have some stuff to review. I've got what I believe are going to be some pretty fun and interesting recipes coming up in the near term, using some ingredients that I haven't maybe seen, I don't think at all, if not at all, very little in the keto community. But I'm reluctant to talk about them because every time I get excited and I talk about something that I'm working on and then it takes longer than I expect, then people just start asking me about it over and over again. And, where's the hot dog bun? Hot dog bun, still working on it. Trust me. Hot dog bun, English muffin, a really good pasta. These are some of the things that are on my list. So I'm working it. There are also a couple of appliances, both that I have and that I didn't have, but people said, Steve, you should totally get one of these. And now I have one of these, and I have one of also these. Not going to tell you what they are, but it's two things that I've gotten fairly common requests for, and we'll be doing some unboxing and testing of these appliances in keto applications, and hopefully those will be fun. But with that, we're going to take a brief little ad break, and in a moment I will be back to recap a couple of other topics that we've talked about recently. In a moment, I'll do a little bit of a recap, follow-up, continued discussion, whatever you want to call it, about some topics that we discussed in last week's podcast. But first of all, I want to return to something that I started back, was it probably around May of last year, and that was occasionally trying to find something positive in this whole COVID-19 situation that we're going through. As this COVID thing has drug on, I found it a lot more difficult to come up with any sort of positives or humorous sort of anecdotes or stories to tell about it. But I did kind of have one last week at Costco. And it's really sort of two things, because there's part of me that was recognizing the humor / irony in some of the things that we're doing now. For example, the people that serve samples at Costco. They'd gotten rid of that when COVID started, and that was always sort of a fun thing to me about Costco, having samples. It's always fun, getting free food, even if it's in a tiny little paper cup or at the end of a toothpick. But Costco shut that down back when COVID started kicking in, and I really felt bad for the people that worked the samples, because I could tell some of them really enjoyed doing it. Well, now those people are back. They don't have samples anymore. They have the food item in plexiglass. So like a slice of pizza under plexiglass. And it's not like one of those slices of pizza that's been done up for food photography. This is a slice of pizza that was just in a pizza oven and now has been sitting under glass or plexiglass, letting the pepperoni juice coagulate. It's not a good look. And that's the only sensory sort of perception you have of it, is looking at it, because you can't touch it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it. So you just look at this sad looking piece of pizza or chicken nugget or whatever it is, and then you have the person working the samples telling you it's down aisle 19. So I'm mildly conflicted on that, in that part of it is I feel good for the people that have their jobs back working the samples, but it also strikes me as just mildly ridiculous too. Another thing that makes me happy about Costco, and I think I mentioned this in a previous podcast, is my Costco, I think, has about 15 checkout lanes. And it used to be you were lucky if they had 2 open. Now they open up as many as they need to keep the lines from forming, and they have 3 people working at every single register. You have the person unloading your cart, you have the person ringing up stuff, and then you have the person reloading your cart. And the person who's reloading your cart generally will ask, would you like a box? And Typically I do. I want a box because I don't want to be lifting one item at a time into my trunk. I like the idea of just taking a box and moving it all into my trunk. My wife, however, does not like it when I come home with a box because that's one more thing in our recycling bin. So because she doesn't like the box, I have this tote. It's like a nylon spring-loaded tote. I don't know how well I can describe it, but it's black. It's about the size of a duffel bag, and it folds down flat, and you release some Velcro and it springs open. It's got a handle, it's got compartments, pretty slick. And when I remember to take it to Costco with me, it's very handy. So I take this to Costco with me, I've filled it up, and I get to the checkout lane, and the guy says, I can't remember if he says I'm not allowed to or I can't, but he said, I can't touch your bag. And again, I felt conflicted because on the one hand, there's the sort of common sense, looking at the rules type of person that thinks, okay, you can't touch my bag, but you can touch all 30 items that I touched and put into my cart. Then there was my inner 13-year-old who just couldn't stop giggling at the notion that this guy just said he can't touch my bag. Now, when I grew up in South Dakota back in the 1970s, we used to call that thing that your groceries went into a sack. I don't know if that's still the case, or if it is, I guess it's a regional thing. Some places call it a grocery sack, other places call it a grocery bag. But I started thinking, if he had said, I can't touch your sack, would that have been funnier or about the same? I'm not sure. A phrase I'm fond of saying is, discretion is the better part of valor, and I chose to employ discretion on both of the things that went through my mind. The incongruence, or is it incongruity, of, being able to touch some things but not touch other things, and the fact that he actually said that he can't touch my bag. So, yeah, it's the little things that we need to enjoy. In terms of last week's Easter egg, pretty much everybody got it. It was Stitch. I mean, first, it's a really big Stitch. And Connor bought that for Colton for Christmas. Got a really good deal at the Disney store. So that was exciting, and it allowed me to tie in family and Hawaii all together. And a few of you caught that as well. So, well done. A couple of interesting things about last week's podcast where we wrapped up 2020. First off, it had the highest ratio of likes to views of any video I've done. Now, I'm not talking like the percentage liked, because that's usually 98, 99% for all of my videos, unless I say something really, really controversial. But in terms of the people that actually clicked thumbs up, 18%, actually over 18% of the people that watched that video clicked a thumbs up. That's practically unheard of in YouTube videos. So I must have done something right. Additionally, almost 10% of the people that viewed the video left a comment, which is, again, an engagement rate that is just astronomical by YouTube standards. And a lot of that had to do with all of you sharing with me your add one, subtract one, / net zero, or whatever we're going to call it, for 30 days. So what are the things you're going to do, the one positive thing that you're going to add for 30 days, and what's the one negative thing that you're going to subtract out of your life for the next 30 days? And it was just so cool reading what everybody had to say. I think there are a lot of great ideas, and I think this is going to be a fun little segment that we can do monthly, where I share with you and you share with me those things that you're going to do to improve your life 30 days at a time throughout 2021. Incidentally, I do own the URL 30 days at a time. The other big thing that really, really popped out to me was once I talked about grounding or earthing, how many people kind of came out of the woodwork and said, yeah, I do earthing. It's miraculous. It's great. I had no idea that there were so many people out there that do it. And I'm not sure why no one brought it up to me sooner in terms of a solution for sleep. Maybe it's because it does have that sort of new agey alternative medicine feel to it. And I think enough of us have already gotten a little bit gun shy just from talking about keto and getting mocked for it that we didn't want to bring up earthing. But it is very much like keto in terms of that experience where once you find someone else that does it, the two of you just feed off each other's energy and you start talking about it. So with that, let me sort of segue into my ongoing experience with earthing. Before I start, I want to make sure that I'm really, really clear on this, that I am not prepared yet to call earthing a miracle solution. I'm experiencing some interesting things, but I'm a sample size of one, and for the time being, I want you to consider this as purely anecdotal, though I am starting to record some data just to see what kind of correlation I'm seeing. I've been doing the earthing now for just over 3 weeks. One thing that I have found that is absolutely 100% undeniable is my dreams. Prior to earthing, I don't remember the last time I had a dream, or at least I don't remember remembering any sort of a dream. What I'm having every single night since I started this are the most vivid dreams, and none of them have been bad. They've all been, good or just normal type of dreams, but so vivid. And I remember them when I wake up. And even when I'm dreaming, I feel very, very close to getting into a lucid dreaming state, which I think would be a lot of fun. So that, absolutely no doubt in my mind, I've experienced that. I also took a couple of the seat mats and I put those in Colton's crib because he hadn't been sleeping well for the last month or two. And with the exception of 2 nights, so 2 nights out of over 20, he has slept straight through the night. So for him, he doesn't know that there's something in the bed, so it can't be a placebo effect. Again, possibly just a coincidence. I'm also a bit of a data geek, so every day I track my weight. In the morning I track my blood ketones and my blood glucose, and now I'm also tracking my sleep. And what I find consistently is when I get a good night of sleep, my blood glucose is lower in the morning, and my weight goes down. On the nights where I get garbage sleep, weight either goes up or is consistent, and blood glucose typically 10 points or more higher than on the nights where I got good sleep. Now I'm going to need more data points before I try doing any regression analysis on this and see, is this statistically significant correlation? But anecdotally, kind of interesting. Kind of leads me to the belief that a lot of the weight that I had put on this year, the whole COVID-15, was probably cortisol and stress related, because when I sleep, the weight goes down, or at least that's what I've observed so far anecdotally. So my hope is now that things are going to be stable for a little period of time, with Connor back in the Army, Colton won't be over here as much, Jaden won't be over here as much, because Jaden gets up on weekends. She goes to work at 4 a.m., so I hear that wakes me up. There are a lot of factors that are sort of outside of my control that wind up, I think, impacting my sleep. And now I'm going to have a period where things are more in control. There are less variables, and I'll really be able to tell if this earthing is giving me the sleep that I'm looking for. And, we'll also find out about sleep apnea when I have my physical. Now, before I close out this podcast, I want to kind of bring it full circle and just talk about the podcast itself. So we're getting a little bit meta here. One of the things that someone brought up to me on one of the last podcasts is, and I don't know what the topic was, but the person says, "You've already talked about this in a previous podcast." Yeah, that's going to happen. And it's going to happen for a couple of reasons. One, I just don't have a tremendous memory. But the other one, and I talked about this in a previous podcast, is when I'm recording the material for a podcast, oftentimes I'll record an hour of material and then whittle it down to 15, 17, 22 minutes. I'll get rid of any sort of verbal miscues or things that just don't come out right. And sometimes I'll get rid of an entire topic just because it took up too much time, or it didn't fit in with the rest of the podcast, or I felt that I didn't like the way that I came off in terms of my attitude. So I'll get rid of it, and then sometimes I remember to do it again, sometimes I don't remember to do it again, and sometimes I leave something in that I thought I deleted, and then I talk about it in a subsequent podcast. So that will happen from time to time, I'm sure, in 2021. But I have found you all to be a pretty forgiving bunch. You've tolerated me this far. I hope you continue to do so in 2021. As always, thanks for watching or listening.